Well, I want to hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Um, but I would love for him to be able to tell me or affirm to me uh, that what I did on earth was helpful in some way, to my family first and foremost, but to others as well, because you strive so much to be there and to help and to serve, and you want to know that you're making an impact. And there are affirmations that come along the way, but to hear the Lord say it straight to you would be, it would feel good. It would feel great. Yeah. So
It's really good to be here because this is kind of a new video series for us, for our church ministry, where we explore and invite different ministers from different churches. And you are one of our first
yeah,
guests. So, it's interesting how connections happen,
yes,
to, if you don't mind me telling
not at
the
all.
audience,
Sure.
you bought like a used electric guitar from me once upon a time,
Yep.
and since then we've just been in touch.
Yep.
So I did not realize that you were a worship leader
Hmm.
at the time that you were picking up the guitar. So, it's interesting when I come across a different worship leader
Hmm.
because they have different experiences, they
Sure.
have different journey. One of the things that I wanted to kind of ask you first was to tell us a little bit about you, like where you work and where you have been, how you came to your faith and things like that.
Sure. Well, my name's Mike Allen, and I've been full-time vocational ministry for about 20 years now. I'm married, have 5 children, part of a blended family. So there's, that may relate with some of your congregation as well. Yeah, 5 children, 3 teenagers, and 2 little ones. So two graduated from high school, and one still in high school, and then 8-year-old and 5-year-old. So that keeps life crazy for us. And I work currently at Southland Christian Church, and I've been there since 2021, so about 3 years now. Before that was at a church in Georgetown, Kentucky, called Harmony Christian Church. Also have served at Tate's Creek Christian Church here in Lexington, and then previously at a church in Mason, Ohio, which if you guys are familiar with Kings Island,
Hmm.
that's right where I was. So I was actually a youth pastor there, and that was kind of fun because the church would buy me a pass to Kings Island every year, and so I got to take students to Kings Island and just hang out, and it was a lot of fun. So
That's awesome.
yeah, but originally, like, my calling to ministry sort of, came through a person. You hear all sorts of stories about how people are called, but it sort of happened gradually over time, I would say. I didn't really grow up in church, sort of nominally, would visit church more than attend church regularly. So some friends of mine in high school continued to invite me over and over again, and they just refused to stop, which was great because that's what I needed.
Hmm.
So eventually I said, yeah, I'll go. And man, I just fell in love with Jesus and what was happening, the things they were talking about, the music. It was a huge piece for me. They had a youth band that did contemporary worship songs, and that really connected with me. And I thought to myself, like, I want to be a part of this, because I realized what it was doing for me, and I was like, I want to share this with other people, but I was painfully shy, so I just kind of sat it aside and was like, I would love to do that, but I don't think I can. But the Lord has ways of working in that. And so I went to school, after graduated high school, went to Butler University to start pre-pharmacy school, um, and got a semester in, and I just didn't have a great experience as a freshman in college, and just meaning I had trouble connecting, finding, a community. And so just sort of became a loner and, I became kind of depressed and decided I wasn't going to continue there. So I moved home and, not knowing what I was going to do, and met with my youth pastor for lunch one day, my former youth pastor. And he kind of spoke some life into me. He said to me, I see in you gifts for ministry, and I've always seen those, but I think I had some buddies who had gone to Bible college to become counselors and pastors. And he's like, why don't you just go, if for no other reason than to just be with your friends and be in an environment that's really, godly, and a place where you can learn more. And so I did, and it was really just his affirmation to me, like affirming the calling that I had already felt, the Lord put on my heart. That kind of pushed me onto that. So I went to Bible college and got ministry opportunities like right away, and so started leading worship, even though I didn't really know what I was doing. I didn't know how to play guitar, hardly at all. Had never sang in front of people, but the Lord just kept giving me opportunities. So that's the long answer to that question.
I love long answers. One of the things that strike out to me is that you didn't grow up in a faith-based home environment.
Mm-hmm.
So what does that mean to you now that you have become not just a believer,
Mm-hmm.
but a believer who has some kind of leadership position within a church?
Sure. It means a lot of things. I think for my family, it means that I'm trying to figure out how to be a leader in my home, faith-wise, just really for the first time without a whole lot of guidance. I have had great mentors, that I've met through church, and my parents have come along in their faith quite a bit as well. I was actually able to baptize my dad when I was 18. I started going to church, and then my family started coming to church more, and so I've seen them grow as well. But yeah, I've just had to find mentors and people to speak into me, not only as it relates to church leadership, but just leadership of my family, and how to parent and how to be a good husband and all those things.
So next part is sort of with all the background in mind. I wanted to ask you questions about you as a youth pastor versus you as a worship leader. So I know that one's a pastoral position, more or less.
Sure.
And you're guiding individuals into faith journey. And I'm assuming you had to preach sermons and things like that because you were in the Bible college and
Sure.
you had to take courses on them.
Sure.
But along with that, being a worship leader, and specifically more in a musical environment, it's a different story.
Yeah.
So how did the experience differ for you, whether that be good or for bad,
Sure.
having taken a position as a pastor versus as a worship leader?
Yeah. Yeah. So my degree in Bible college, like, of course, you have to pick a major, So my major was biblical studies with an emphasis in youth ministry. So they had classes that were kind of geared towards that type of thing, like teaching adolescents. I took some adolescent psychology courses and things like that to try to, do your best to communicate with a young person where they're at in life and where they're at mentally and emotionally and all that stuff, which was great. I didn't do anything related to music at all as far as training, formal training. I was in marching band when I was in high school, and so I was interested in music. I love to listen to music. I love to sing worship music at church, but that was never part of my formal training. So yeah, I took the job. I interned at a church, the church in Mason, Ohio. I interned there as part of my schooling, and that church this is a pretty sizable church, about 2,500 folks, and the youth ministry was really growing. The high school and middle school were still combined at that point, and they were kind of toying with the idea of breaking it out into high school, middle school.
Okay.
Dedicated groups. And so kind of as a trial run, as an intern, they gave me the middle school kids, like, here, see what you can get going here. I think it was just giving them dedicated time and space and intent, to grow and stuff, that it really just exploded. Like in the time that I was there. So then I got the opportunity when I graduated. They brought me on full time and was able to serve in that way for. I guess I was the middle school youth pastor for 9 years at that church. So kind of during that time, people find out that you can do music stuff. They're like, and we need people to do music stuff. So more opportunities just come up. I think I started leading worship for youth first. And so I was doing both teaching and leading worship and stuff like that. And then opportunities came up within the church at large to lead worship for adults as well. And so I was kind of doing both of those things in tandem. And it was busy. It was very busy, but it was awesome. Lots of opportunity to learn and grow as a youth pastor and as a worship pastor. So worship leadership just kind of came to me in some weird way. It just kind of presented itself, and I found that that's really where my passions kind of lied. Over the years, my service in the church has moved more towards that side of things. So I no longer teach or anything like that, even though I do kind of miss that at times. But yeah, now my job is just dedicated worship leadership stuff.
When you talk about like doing both all together,
Mm-hmm.
and this is more for ministers who are out there who don't necessarily have the sizable congregation
Sure.
to have multiple different positions.
Sure.
They are, in a way, some way, shape, or form, forced into a situation
Mm-hmm.
where they have to balance both. How did you, I guess, first of all, how did you manage that?
Mm-hmm.
And secondly, what was the difficulty of doing both all together?
Sure. I would say I didn't manage it very well because I was young. I wanted to serve and I wanted to help make an impact and things like that. And so I guess just by nature, I'm like personality-wise, I'm more of just someone who wants to help always. And so I can do that at the detriment of myself, and my family and things like that. And so drawing boundaries was hard, because there's always an opportunity to serve. There's always an opportunity to do more. And so for me, it was hard to strike that balance of, because it's all good stuff, these are all good things. And so striking that balance of, yes, these are all good things, but too much of a good thing might not be the best thing,
Mm-hmm.
And so just through the years, just through trial and error and doing it wrong, I kind of figured it out, So, and now I feel like there is a good kind of ministry and like work-life balance, which, in ministry, those lines just kind of get blurred because life is
Mm-hmm.
ministry, like we take Jesus with us wherever we go, and you're never not doing ministry. And so when you're in full-time ministry, it's kind of, you have to kind of look at part of it as work, and part of it as, like life outside of work. It's all ministry, So it's easy to blur those lines for sure, I think. So I don't know if that answers your question.
I think it did.
Yeah.
One of the things that also I wanted to discuss with you particularly was um, worship ministry.
Mm-hmm.
So, worship ministry is still to this day, I think, what can stir up a lot of controversies within a church.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely brings a lot of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
While I think a lot of people may agree that it's not the most important area of ministry, it's definitely the most recognizable one.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're just more exposed to different congregation members and even staff members. You're exposed to media. With the development of social media, you're just more exposed to the world.
Sure.
How is it for you in particular, when it comes to worship ministry? How do you in some way, shape, or form manage your time and manage planning? And how do you focus or try to focus more on worshiping rather than trying to essentially showcase your music styles or
Hmm.
trying to focus on performative aspects of it?
Sure. That's a big question. There's a lot there, and serving in different churches, there's definitely a different culture at every church. Period. Right, and there's a different worship culture at every church, and I've served at churches where I've been able and had the freedom to kind of develop that culture, and then now I serve at a church at Southland where that culture is pre-existing me, and it's Southland is a mega church, what people would term a mega church, right? And so I come there with all sorts of different church experience, small churches, medium churches, big churches, right? So for me to step into a culture that is systematic and process driven is different for me. And there's not as much like perceived kind of creativity or ability to be creative in the setting that I'm in now. That's not a bad thing. It's in many ways it's a great thing because, we talked earlier about wearing multiple hats within a church, and that's a wonderful thing, and it afforded me the opportunity to learn a lot of different things. Right, we're sitting in front of cameras right here and lights that you've learned how to use, right? Maybe not because of church, maybe, but you're able to use it in church, right?
Hmm.
You're able to use your musical abilities, production type stuff, running the soundboard and all that sort of stuff. You kind of learn a lot of valuable skills, having to wear multiple hats like that. At Southland, it's kind of different because there's dedicated staff people to do each and every one of those things. So I really get to focus in more on just worship and leading a team of musicians and worshipers. And so that's really cool. So it actually frees me up to be more of a pastor, and that's kind of interesting. I lead a team of about 60 musicians, and they kind of rotate in and out, vocalists. We use a full band every week. That's kind of part of the worship culture there that they've set is like, this is kind of how we do things. And we always have this, acoustic guitar, 2 electric guitars, bass, keys, drums. We use backing tracks, click track, all that stuff. I don't know if you guys use that or not. And then we have a male and female worship leader most weeks, and then background vocalists as well. So usually a team of 9 to 10 people on stage every week, kind of rotating in and out week to week. At Southland, there's a system for everything, which is kind of, it's new for me still, even though I've been there for 3 years. This is how we select songs. Is it singable? Is it for the average person that's in the congregation? Can they pick up on it quickly? Can they sing it? Is it in a key that's not going to be too high for most people, or too low for most people? Is it focused on Jesus, or is it focused on me? And if it's focused on me, then maybe it's not the best thing to use in corporate worship, because the goal is to get as many people singing and worshiping as possible. So they've sort of through the years thought through all of that stuff and written it all down, and that's a really helpful tool for someone like me coming in. It's like these are the values we have, and we can put the things that we do through this filter, and it's really nice, to be able to just know, well, does it meet this criteria or this one? And if not, then it probably isn't going to be something that we use in corporate worship. Just talking about like song selection and stuff like that. And that goes even into like preparation for worship, rehearsal stuff, what the process is for that. And as much as I thought when I came in that seemed rigid and kind of like maybe constrictive, it gives a lot of freedom because everyone coming in knows what to expect. And not only do they know what to expect, they know how to prepare, which is great. So you're our volunteers. We use all volunteers. We get resources out to them, and they know exactly what's expected of them when they come to rehearsal. They know that they need to learn their part before rehearsal and stuff like that. And that rehearsal is more about bringing the music together and talking through dynamics and transitions between songs and things like that. So that we can limit distractions in the worship experience as much as possible. And all of that coming from other churches where I don't know that I even thought about some of those things before. You know, we were trying to bring the music together in a way that was not distracting, that it was pleasing to the ear, you know, that people could join in with. And if we could do that, then we were doing good, you know. So it's just about your context, you know, just different worship cultures, you know, and I've been part of a lot of different ones, you know. So somewhere we don't rehearse really at all until Sunday morning, and that's great too, you know. They're all great, and I've been just hugely blessed in each one of those. But just to give some context about what's different about serving at a big church versus a small church and things like that.
I think there's also maybe potentially a congregational difference. So let's say that you are just attending as one of the congregation members. In your experience, what is the difference of attending what you termed mega church? I would just use a big church,
Sure.
but you know,
Sure.
where a church congregation might be more than 2,000 people. Attending worship services like that versus attending worship services in a smaller or medium-sized local community-centric churches, what do you think is like the most striking difference, and how would that um, help you as a believer attending the worship services?
Yeah. I mean, I think so much of it comes down to authenticity, whether it's teaching or leading worship or playing an instrument, reading a scripture, giving you know, some sort of meditation for communion, whatever it is. You know, it's just, can I relate with that person? You know, and if so, then this is from my perspective. If I'm stepping into a church, if I feel like I can relate with those people and that they're real and authentic, then it's a place that I will keep coming. I love music and I have my preferences in music, but if I feel like the people who are here are worshiping in spirit and truth and in their, you know, with their whole heart, then it's going to be a place that I want to be, you know. So that's the biggest thing, I think, you know, and that goes for teaching too, you know. In teaching, you know, and preaching, vulnerability, you know, from that person that's talking to us about trying to relay to us what God's message is, it goes a long way, you know. Just being able to relate with one another in that we're all sinners, you know, and God has called me as the teacher, which I'm not, but, you know, God has called me to relay this message to you, you know. To me, that just at a very kind of organic level, that's what relates with me. And I think that's true for a lot of people, I think, you know. And so I feel like I see that in churches of all sizes, you know. If the people who are in leadership there really believe in what they're doing and they really believe in the message of the gospel, then people are going to relate.
So the next question is a little bit different, but
Sure.
it might sound similar to some of the people. Um, for me, what struck me, I think, differently than a lot of people is that if I'm surrounded by age group, certain age group, that might bring a different energy to
Sure.
the worship, and that might also, in a longer term, define certain worship culture and worship experience,
Sure.
expectations. Having worked as a worship pastor for so long, I'm sure you have encountered a situation where you had to do worship ministry in front of youth or
Hmm.
college age to all the way up until, elderly population.
Hmm.
I do know, from my understanding, so correct me if I'm mistaken,
Sure.
so far you have been leading worship to all congregations, correct? So
Hmm.
like there's no age difference. Well, there is a lot of age difference and it's multi-generational.
Yeah.
So let's say that for a second that if you are leading worship for different age groups,
Hmm.
what do you do anything differently, or are there different things that you might prepare in
Yeah.
advance and things like that?
I think so. Of course, I guess the biggest example for me is leading worship for youth, which I still do, and leading worship for adults. Is yeah, just like you would if you're teaching a message. We talked about earlier how in school I kind of studied adolescents and what they're thinking and feeling and that kind of thing, what they're going through, and what relates with them and what doesn't. I think you can do the same thing with worship music. I just think there's different styles and things that appeal more to certain age groups. It sounds elementary and simple, I guess, but I would just try to be very intentional about that. Just I'm on purpose going to do song as a worship leader. I'm going to pick songs and do songs that I feel like the people that I'm leading worship for and with are going to engage the most with, because if they're sort of put off or turned off by the music that I'm leading, then they're not going to participate as well, and or it's going to make them be distracted and think about the music rather than what we're doing together.
Hmm.
And so and I realize that's it's an ideal situation to hit all of those things in the best way. But certainly that's what I would want to go for,
Hmm.
So
This is some of the topics that have been relevant on my YouTube feed, so I wanted to sort of raise this as well.
sure.
There have been a lot of debates related to, do we do just mostly hymns? Do we do contemporary worship?
Hmm.
Is there should there be any style constrictions when it comes to choosing songs?
Hmm.
And I think that makes a difference. While people again might not agree that, well, word is the most important part,
Sure.
there is definitely a stylistic preferences depending on the age group and depending on the congregation. Um, I guess my question to you is, what is your opinion about some people saying that we should use more hymns,
Hmm.
or we should more, on the other hand, we should more contemporary worship
Yeah.
songs?
I mean, it is all about, I don't know if it's still kind of a thing, but all the rage for the longest time in church and in business, the business world as well, was like, well, we have to have a purpose statement. What is our purpose? What's our goal? Who are we trying to reach? It's hard. Paul said, be all things to all people. That's hard. That's really hard to do, right? And so I think that's why we have so many churches, is because we all have different maybe nuanced goals. We have different targets of people that we're trying to draw in, that we're trying to mature in their faith. And I think that's a good thing. I think that it's great because there's lots of entry points into faith. You can find what resonates with you. At the same time, there's that very Americanized thinking of like, I can find whatever I want, you know what I mean? And so that's the negative part of it, I think, is consumerism. The consumeristic kind of attitude that we can have about it is like, well, I like that church because I like the music. I like this church because I like the teaching. I just wish I could have this teacher and this worship. And I just think we're so affected by instant nature of the things that we want to have and things like that, and it's all at our disposal. And So that makes it really hard as church leaders to know what direction to go. There's studies out there that show that if we can get men in church, then the whole family will come to church, right? Hopefully, right? Percentage-wise, that's not always the case, right? But percentage-wise, if we can get a father to church, we can also get his wife and his children, maybe his parents, maybe her parents, to church as well. And so Southland, a long time ago, decided that was going to be their target, right? And so that gave them something to go for rather than trying to, give it like a shotgun approach and let's do a little bit of everything, or let's have a service that's just traditional and a service that's all contemporary, which, many churches have tried that. I've been part of churches that do that. So rather than do that, let's just decide we're going to try through our preaching, through our music. They're not going to be 100% geared towards a man, but a young man, 30 to 35-year-old man. But that's going to have some weight in what we do, right? The kind of music that we do, the kind of teaching that, the kind of illustrations we use, our teachers use when they teach. And so that's who we're trying to relate to. And that might sound kind of crazy, but that's been their goal, and I think I do when I'm at church and I look out, I see lots and lots of families, which is a wonderful thing. And there's lots and lots of single folks too, but and there's lots and lots of age difference, that church over the years has gone from a church that was all hymns, to a church that is pretty much all contemporary. We do hymns still. Probably 2 to 3 times a month, we'll throw one hymn in the set. Out of the 4 to 5 song set, we'll do a hymn in there. And man, it's awesome. Like everybody sings, and it's wonderful, And so, in the context I'm in, it's great to kind of like throw a hymn in there, and just it's like there's a legacy along with that. There's people who have been there for years and years and years and grew up there and got married there. For our congregation, I feel like it's kind of a throwback to like, this is where we came from, and this is how we used to do things, and it was awesome too, and yeah, that's a long answer too. I got lots of long answers.
That's my goal, is to get you to answer some of these in a long way.
Yeah.
So we're hitting almost 45-minute mark, so I want to start to wrap up.
Sure.
So I want to give you some of the shorter questions that's a little more personal than what we've talked about so far.
Sure.
So who are some of the, as far as I understand, you play guitar. Mm-hmm. Who are some of the non-Christian, or I guess people who write non-Christian songs, who have inspired you to play music?
My favorite band right now is a band called the Steel Woods, and it's kind of a mix of country and blues and rock, which are all genres that I really love. And it's kind of like a amalgamate of all those things. It's great. And I just discovered them about a year ago, and so I've been all in on that lately. Just because it's like punchy, heavy guitars, and the vocals are very bluesy and just, I don't know, yeah. So those types of music I listen to. I grew up in small town Indiana, and my parents listened to a lot of country and pop music on the radio, and so those are kind of the genres that sort of formed my musical taste. So
recently, on the flip side, what about as far as Christian musicians? Are there any Christian musicians that sort of inspire you as a worship leader, but also as a believer?
Sure. I really like the rawness and the authenticity of Corey Asbury's stuff. He's really he really sort of pushes the edges of what we feel comfortable with, which I like, because it's real, like, and it's so easy in church context to try to leave the parts of us that are hurting and whatever at the door and not bring them in with us, and really allow the Lord and other people to see us as we are. So he's one that's kind of inspiring to me lately.
So last question.
Yeah.
This one you can take some time.
Okay.
Let's say that you have died and you went on to heaven. What would you like to hear from God?
Man. Well, I want to hear him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But I would love for him to be able to tell me or affirm to me that that what I did on earth was helpful in some way, to my family first and foremost, but to others as well, because you strive so much to be there and to help and to serve, and you want to know that you're making an impact. And there are affirmations that come along the way, but to hear the Lord say it straight to you would be, it would feel good. It would feel great. Yeah. So.